Ruben Gallego is a Democratic senator from Arizona. Last year, he won his election there even as Donald Trump was also winning the state. Gallego has a sharp view about where Democrats have gone wrong.
You've been talking about this term Latinx.
It's something that's used largely by white liberals and small amount of Latinos.
And he has a story that he thinks Democrats should be telling if they want to start winning more often. Which is why I wanted to talk to him for America's Next Story, a Times opinion series about the ideas that once held our country together and those that might do so again. Senator Gallego, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You've just dropped one of your kids off at daycare.
That's right.
You just had a new baby. Congratulations.
That's right. Thank you.
And your oldest kid is here with us today in the studio.
Yes, he's on break, so he's going to tag along with Dad for a bit.
He's come from Arizona to Washington for a break.
That's right.
Excellent. Well, thanks for bringing him.
Of course.
Let's go back to college.
Oh, God. Okay.
You went to Harvard in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And back then, as is still the case, the most popular things to do coming out of Harvard included tech and finance and consulting. You did something different. You went into the Marines. Why?
Well, it wasn't much of a choice. I was a reservist, and I'd always intended to serve my country one way or the other. And I joined about a year before September 11th. And after that, I went on a series of activations. And when I got out, I had basically one and a half years left on my contract. I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they told me if I joined that I would be sent to Iraq. And, to be honest, I hated the war. I hated that we had gone to war, but I also felt very conflicted that if I didn't go, someone else was going to take my spot. And so I went, and unfortunately, it was a very hard activation. But the reason I ended up, not in finance, not in this, not in anything else, is because I was just serving my country. And by the time I was done, the war had changed me a lot to the point where I just couldn't go and do the finance work, the other types of work. I needed to do something that had some meaning and drive in my life because the war really took a lot out of me.
And so you moved to Arizona and you get involved in politics.
Yeah.
You're in the state legislature, and then you're elected to Congress. Yeah. And then you run for U.S. Senate. And let's go to election night last year, because you must have had mixed feelings. I mean, you win and you are going to the U.S. Senate at a pretty young age. Yeah. And you also realize that Donald Trump is going back to the presidency. Yeah. What was that like when you realized that you were going to win, but Kamala Harris was going to lose?
So we knew on election night, when the numbers came in from 2 big counties and 1 rural area, that there was basically no way for us to lose at that point. But seeing the numbers that the vice president hit was, and she was leading, but knowing how kind of votes break out, we knew that wasn't going to hold. It was hard because I wanted to jump for joy. My family had sacrificed for 2 years to run for office. And, we were proud of as a family that, we had hit an amazing American story. We didn't come from a lineage of senators. But then, of course, you have Trump, and you realizing that that's going to be a very hard situation. I was hopeful, to be honest, that maybe things would be better than they are right now, but they're not.
How do you diagnose why you won Arizona in particular and Kamala Harris lost it?
We were very real about what was actually happening on the ground, and we didn't lie to ourselves. I think a lot of Democrats running, and it wasn't just Vice President Harris, that they wanted to talk about the things they were comfortable talking about. They didn't want to go to where the voter was.
So they wanted to talk about abortion and democracy.
Basically, yes. And sometimes there's some voters that want to talk about that. But what we were seeing on the ground in Arizona was that people were worried about being able to make the rent. They were worried about border security. And they were worried about, what is truly happening to the American dream. And for a place like Arizona that was known to be affordable, had always been affordable, for the first time in, anybody's, memory, it became a very unaffordable place very quickly. And we sounded extremely out of touch that we weren't talking about that. Now, my campaign, we did talk about it. So it's all we talked about. We talked about the cost of everything. And we did it in a way that wasn't an economic message. It was like an emotional message, right? I talked about how I grew up poor, and I understand how frustrating it is. And I remember those days to work and work and work, and then look up and you're still underwater, right? And that is what was dragging down a lot of people in Arizona, especially working class Latino men who, have a mentality that I can work, and keep working and get myself out of the situation. But for the first time, I heard this like desperation that I had never heard in my 45 years of being a Latino man, that they just felt that they weren't going to make it. And we talked to them because I understood what they were going through. A lot of Democrats did not do that. Certainly not in Arizona, but I think also across the country.
I think if we had a member of Vice President Harris's campaign team here, they might say, hey, look, we tried. We criticized Donald Trump's tariffs as being attacks on the American people. We talked about her focus on lifting people up. And so I do think they tried. I'm interested.
I think they did try. I just think there's ways to do it that probably weren't able to connect.
Yeah. And I mean, what's interesting to me about this is it plays into, I think, this broader critique you've had about the Democratic Party, which is that how it talks to people.
And how it treats people, too.
And you got a whole bunch of attention a few years ago for banning your staff in Congress from using the term Latinx, which you said is mostly a term that white liberals use and Latinas and Latinos think is silly. And I'm interested in your critique of how Democrats talk about the economy, because I think often the economy is an issue in which Democrats feel like, hey, we're comfortable on that issue. It's not like immigration. It's not like gender. We're comfortable in the economy. But you've said actually, basically the Democratic Party still talks, say, too much like Harvard professors and not enough like Marine Corps members, to use your life. And so specifically, you've said this idea that Democrats should talk about the American dream in terms of prosperity rather than, quote, a nebulous message about justice.
Yes.
Can you be more specific about that?
So, I mean, a lot of times, especially in the last couple of years, what I've heard coming from the Democratic side, my friends, is that they talk about economic equity. They talk about these ideas of essentially, trying to equalize capitalism to lift people out of poverty. And that's just not how people think. And it's also this assumption that the Democrats themselves, the actual base voters, don't want to be prosperous. They don't want to be rich. They don't want to be successful. They don't want to be stable. And so we have this situation within the Democratic talk where we kind of shy away from that because we feel like that's somehow icky, right? I'm surrounded by working class Democrats. And the reason I speak the way I speak is because no one in my family is involved in politics. Half my families are in union. The other half are very working class. I have one sister who's a doctor. I live in a working class neighborhood in Phoenix. No one there talks about economic equity. What they talk about is, I want to be able to buy a home. I am starting a business. I want to make money. I want my kids to do well. I want to be happy. And when we have these like nebulous positions that people just can't push their finger on, then Democrats are kind of losing an opportunity, because if we're the party of opportunity, if we're the party that's going to give you a real chance at the American dream, buying a home, starting a business, being able to go on vacation, for God's sake, the things that people used to be able to do, then people will say, that's the party that I want in there to fight for me. But when we're just this kind of like nebulous blah group of people that is going to protect this idea, but we don't actually ever really do anything about it, they're going to go off to something else shinier. And the shinier has come with Donald Trump.
This is the point where I have to ask about big-ass trucks.
Yeah.
So in an
Troquitas, yes.
In an interview with the New York Times, you said that what Latino men want is to own a big-ass truck, which is connected very much to what you were just saying. Yeah. And I assume you would say the point is broader than Latino men. It's men and women. It's
men and women. It's everything.
Asian, Black, and white Americans.
Yeah. I mean, I said that mostly just to kind of break through this, because I've heard it so much, like, our Latino men go this way. I'm like, well, Latino men want things. There's a lot of Democrats and the kind of the more liberal side that would hope that Latino men are more reflective and look and vote like, white liberal men. They don't. They're different. They're entirely different. They have an entirely different experience. And they're not like Black men either, right? They have an entirely different experience. And so to kind of break through. Like, you have to keep it simple. They want security. They want economic security, and they want physical security for their family. And their wants are legitimate. We shouldn't just, shy away from or ignore it because it puts us in an uncomfortable spot. So the troquita, the truck, it's symbolic because it really is a status symbol that you have succeeded in this country, right? It means that you can afford a brand new, nice truck, that you take that truck to work, and that work brings dignity to your family. It helps you pay the bills. You get to load your kids on there. You get to go on vacation. It involves this whole symbolic gesture to your community that you are leading your family and that you are bringing them into the American dream. That's what it really represents. I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable about that, but that really is it's as simple as that.
Also, trucks are fun.
Trucks are a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I think, to me, that's a version of you saying the party needs to talk more about prosperity and less about things like equity and justice.
Look, I think there was a lot of thought post-Obama that if we focus on equity and justice, then that somehow would be the unifier of, the Democratic coalition. It ends up, the biggest unifier Democratic coalition, Black, white, Latino, immigrants, Asians, everybody else, is the personal checking account, is people being able to buy a home, be able to pay bills, be able to get groceries without stressing out. That actually is what unifies our coalition. And when we walked away from that because of just pure political convenience, our coalition started eroding more and more and more. And we're seeing it all the time.
Look, I didn't predict that Donald Trump would get increasing support over his political career from Latino and Black and Asian Americans. But the fact is, he has.
Yeah.
And it feels like Democrats made this fundamental misdiagnosis, which is that people think of themselves first in terms of racial or ethnic groups. And it turns out that doesn't seem to be the case.
It doesn't. It depends. That's the other thing. It's like, when does it happen? When there is that racial group feels like they collectively are under attack. Like, I tell you right now, the Republican Party is going to lose badly with Latinos come 2026 because they moved beyond, hey, we're going after criminals. Now there's racially profiling in the streets, right? Originally I'm from Chicago. As you know, I have a lot of friends and family there, varying degrees of politics and who they support. And I would say I did see Latino men, especially in Chicago, moving away from the Democratic Party. That's not happening right now.
I promise we'll get to immigration in a couple
you
minutes.
don't have to. I talk about it too much.
We will. Let's stay on trucks for a minute.
Trucks.
So you said big ass trucks. And then the writer Matthew Iglesias took that and coined this term big ass truck abundance.
You're right.
Which plays into this policy debate and political debate on abundance within the Democratic Party. And so I'm going to overgeneralize a little bit, but the abundance crowd, which includes my colleague Ezra Klein, basically says the Democratic Party should focus on getting rid of bureaucracy and making more stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Houses, transportation, clean energy. And then there's another part of the debate, which is more associated with the progressive wing of the party, Bernie Sanders, AOC, that says, no, economic and political power is the issue. And we can't be naive, and we have to focus on cracking down on corporate power, and we should be creating universal government programs for childcare, which is, I know, an issue you deal with in your own personal life.
Just today.
Just today. So where are you? Or do you think you're more on one side in that debate, or do you straddle the two sides?
There's a really good commercial for taco shells, and there's a debate of whether they should be soft or hard, right? And at the end of the commercial, this, really cute Latina little girl says, ¿Por qué no los dos? Why can't it be both? We should be able to mix both of this, right? We should be building things fast as possible, especially housing. And at the same time, we should be making sure that monopolies don't control markets that are driving up prices. We should be able to build roads fast and at the same time make sure that there's ways for us to have affordable childcare for working class America. I don't understand why everyone seems to be in these corners, because the American people aren't that way. If we make their lives better by both means, then we get the net benefit, which is their support and their vote.
And so you're saying you can be both pro-abundance and you can be a populist who wants to take on corporate power.
Absolutely. It doesn't mean that everything's a fight. It doesn't mean like every corporation is bad. But but there are some bad ones, right? It doesn't mean that every regulation is bad, but there are some bad regulations. And I think we, as policymakers, as the actual people that vote and our leaders, we have to be able to pick and choose when to use the tools, right? So maybe sometimes it is abundance. Sometimes it is, going against, our monopolies.
So it's interesting because I think the answers you just gave on abundance could also have been given by Zohran Mamdani, the New York politician.
I've heard of him.
I'm sure you have. What do you think of him?
Look, I think he really struck a chord. And, when I talk about, big ass truck policy, and that's how I got a lot of people to vote, like the man's talking about affordable rents, right? And, be able to afford for New York, like a apartment with a second bathroom or something.
Medium-assed apartment.
Medium-assed apartment, right? He talks about affordability. I disagree with some things. Like, I don't think they should have government-run grocery stores. But I guarantee you there's a lot of New Yorkers are like, yeah, you know what? I don't agree with that. But at least he's talking about it. At least he has some ideas. At least he's pushing something. And I think there's a lot of Democrats that are missing the boat. Like, we don't have to support him on everything. We could just disagree in some areas. But the fact is that he talks about affordability. He talks about trying to make people's lives better. That's resonating. And now, we may not agree how he's going to get there, but let's not ignore the lesson that he's showing.
I do think there's this interesting question about the attention economy today. Zohran Mamdani is clearly on the left part of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And I think what we see today is that it often feels easier for people who are making arguments and drawing contrasts, and their critics would say are at the extremes, to get attention.
Yeah.
You're much more moderate. And sometimes moderation can seem boring, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
But you figured out a way to break through in Arizona. How do you think about how someone with your politics doesn't just come off as boring and technocratic in this day and age of social media and attention?
I think what happened with us in Arizona was that we used some smart ways to kind of get into people's feeds, right? We did boxing matches. We did car shows, truck shows, a lot of stuff. I reached out to white suburban people with pickleball tournaments too, all right? So we did everything we could. But the reason it resonates is because while I was using them to get their attention, I was talking to them about what they were really worried about right now. And the ability for any candidate or elected official to talk in an authentic way will carry through. It will. The problem is we have, and on the Democratic side, we have less and less of us that actually can speak about the personal checkbook and economics of a family in an authentic way. That's why you could get on TV as much as you want. You could go on podcasts, you do your Instagram lives, and it's not gonna catch.
It's really interesting because whether you're coming from the left or closer to the center, both Mamdani in New York and you in Arizona, your messaging really emphasized those economic issues.
Yeah.
So he didn't talk in his mayoral campaign about ICE or about Gaza very much.
Correct.
He emphasized the same things you're talking about.
Right. Because that's what voters care about every day.
Yeah.
You get reminded about it every week. So, I have 3 kids. We have a family of 5. Depending when the rest of my family's over, it could be even bigger. But we go grocery shopping every week. So I see that grocery bill. And I'm very lucky. My wife and I make a good salary, so it doesn't impact us that much. But I noticed that price. And I still have poor boy mentality. When you grow up poor, it's hard to get out of that mentality. So I'm still kind of watching all this. If I'm seeing this, I can't imagine what a family is thinking every Saturday and Sunday when they go shopping.
Yeah.
And, it hits. It just hits.
So we've touched on immigration a couple times. Now let's really dig in on it. One of your early forays into politics in Arizona was you helped lead a recall campaign against Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Yeah, I got very close too.
Who was this, as I'm sure many listeners remember, was this cruel, anti-immigrant sheriff.
Yep.
More recently, I think your image on immigration has changed. In your campaign, you criticized Joe Biden's open immigration policy. You co-sponsored the Laken-Riley Act, which calls for the detention of undocumented immigrants who've committed certain crimes even before the court trial has happened. How would you describe your own personal evolution or not on immigration?
It hasn't actually been that much of an evolution. Why was I trying to recall Sheriff Joe? He was racially profiling Americans. He was racially profiling Latinos because we were brown. He was pulling them over while driving brown. Nothing to do with immigration, nothing else like that. Number one, that's and I'll do it again if should that ever happen again. Number two, I think the democratic understanding of immigration and illegal immigration has always been pretty basic, and then it went awry, which is we're for border security, we're for humanitarian immigration reform, and we're for reforming the overall the visa worker permit. Something happened where all of a sudden now we were also supposed to be extremely liberal when it comes to asylum seekers.
When do you think that happened?
It's sometime happening between Trump and Biden. And I think there was this overall reaction to Trump in his first term that a lot of people just assumed that this is where the new conversation went. When there was some of us that grew up on the border one way or the other. I also lived in Mexico for a little bit and have family in all levels of immigration going on through my whole life. When that started happening, a lot of us were like, whoa, that's not what we want. But nobody wanted to listen to us. And what happened was that a lot of policymakers started listening to some more liberal people about what was happening at the border.
Liberal people who claim to speak for the Latino community.
Correct, yes.
And in many cases, liberal people who themselves are Latino, the ones getting a hearing in the administration.
Yes, it's essentially. And because they were in their little bubbles and, without any personal experience, the administration just basically listened to them. And for us that had always had the same position, right? My position has not changed. I am for border security. I am for immigration reform, sane immigration reform. If you're a criminal, you should be convicted and deported, right? That's never changed. The problem is we went totally to an area where a lot of Democrats weren't. And so my position, I think, is where traditionally Democrats have been. If you hear what Hillary Clinton was saying, if you hear what Barack Obama was saying, hear what Bill Clinton was saying about immigration, that's been the traditional place. What happened in the last 4 years was absolutely out of norm of where Democrats are and why we lost, because it was out of norm where most Americans are. And now if you see what's happening right now, most Americans are very unhappy what's happening with immigration right now.
Yep. Because
they like that the border is secure. And I get yelled at all the time because I say, it's a good thing that the border is secure.
Meaning Trump has secured
Yes,
it.
exactly. That's a good thing. It's a value to this country that we have the lowest amount of illegal immigrants crossing the border right now. What I want them to do now is let's do immigration reform. Stop racially profiling. Stop deploying National Guards to patrol these streets that supposedly are dangerous, and really invest in a smart way of dealing with a broken system.
So I think that's what some Democrats who are in a little bit of a different place than you would say, which is there will be a time to debate the finer points of immigration policy and a time to vote for a bill like the Lake and Riley Act or not vote for it. But this isn't that time. We've got federal agents in masks picking people up off the street.
Right.
We've got the president deporting people to a horrible foreign prison without due process. We've got the president and his administration racially profiling Latinos based on the way they look.
You have to do both.
And speak. And so
you have to, because here's why you have to do both, David. If you give the voter the option of saying either we're going to have security that's way too strong or no security at all, they're going to give the more security side the benefit of doubt. So the Democrats, we have to have a position that is a position that Americans can gather to and say, you know what, I totally disagree with what this guy's doing, with the roundups, the deportations, everything else like that. What I want to see is what the Democrats are proposing, and what they're proposing is more where I am. If we're only oppositional and just saying no, we're going to end up losing this argument in the end, because people generally want to be secure. And if we don't give them some type of idea of what we're bringing, they're going to go to whoever is giving them any type of security.
Let me read you what Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois recently said. He said, "This is exactly the moment for people to stand up. And do I see enough people doing it? No, I don't."
Yeah.
Do you disagree with that?
I think this is the moment to stand up. I think there are people that are moving into the fight. This is not a very easy situation for, I think, a lot of people in your everyday American. Why? It's not that they want an open border. It's not that they want people deported. There's just a lot of stuff going on in their lives right now. There's just a lot of stuff. And, from talking to my family that's still in Chicago, they're afraid.
Of being picked up.
They're afraid of being picked up. They're afraid for their country. But, asking for people to take action right now, it's not as easy as it sounds because people are generally afraid of what could happen. And that is part of this, I think, decision-making that's happening right now. But it's not like, we're going to be able to protest like we used to back in the day because people are generally afraid for their personal safety.
I think I've also heard you suggesting that Democrats need to be strategic about this. And you probably wouldn't put it this way, but not always stand on principle. So after
I would never put it that way.
Well, I know you wouldn't, but that's why I want to push you a little bit. It feels fair. So I read an interview where you were discussing Trump's deportation of alleged gang members to El Salvador. And you said it's important to defend due process. And look, you've criticized Trump as you're doing here. But you also said Democrats shouldn't, quote, just jump and automatically assume that, number one, that the person you're advocating for is someone that people can empathize with. Yep. And so I'm kind of interested in, you basically said, look, that was an unjust deportation, but it's not the fight we want to have.
Yes. Look, you got to be smart about this. There's perfect examples, throughout any type of movement. I'll give you a good example. When Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to go to the back of the bus, it wasn't coincidence that it was Rosa Parks. They had purposely vetted a lot of candidates to who would be the best example of this horrible segregation system. If we want to point out how awful this deportation system is, what it's doing to families, we should do it in a smart way. Let's find the most caring person, the person that people can empathize with, the person that says, I want that person to stay in our country, right? Don't rush to a fight that someone has already set up because these guys, and I think a lot of people don't quite understand, Donald Trump's people are smart. They set up traps of this nature all the time. And they love nothing more for us to just run in there and just get into it with them. And they have all the advantages. They've already set up the field to fight in. They have all the information and we're just, playing catch up. If you want to win, and I think that's the ultimate goal, let's be smart about actually doing this, right? Why not use, the people that can actually connect with this issue?
And this is a podcast series about what America's next story should be. And what you're saying is be smart about the story that the Democratic Party is telling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to want to win and we have to plan to win. Those things don't necessarily happen in Democratic politics. Yeah. And I've seen it over and over and over again. I've never lost a race every time I run. And the reason I've never lost a race is largely because, I don't bring any political perspective. I bring a Marine perspective to this. The Marines, they teach you everything is about mission objective first. And then you build your whole campaign, your whole plan, your whole battle plan around mission objective. And you're agnostic about it. And so, when we ran for, the House, for the Senate, I figured out what did I need to win, put the plan together and go. Democrats sometimes try to stumble into victories. And that might be fine, but this really means people's lives are in danger. And Democrats not winning in 2024, 2016 really cost us a lot of our positions and values that are going to be in danger for quite a while.
And I would say that I think sometimes Democrats confuse the story that they want to be the winning message with the one that actually is going to be the winning message.
Yes, because it makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Then why are we doing this, right? We need to win. With us not winning, we don't have the Supreme Court. We won't have the Supreme Court for quite a while. Us now picking up a couple Senate seats for the last couple of years puts us out of potentially holding power again in the Senate. All the victories we avoided because we were afraid of these conversations, these icky conversations. Look what's happening to this country now.
And there's a class aspect of this, which is the people who often find these positions and conversations icky tend to be more affluent and more educated. And in working class neighborhoods, actually people are quite willing to engage in these conversations for the most part.
And they do all the time. That's the thing. They do all the time. Like I'll give you an example. Going back to the big ass truck, everyone's like, oh, you're looking down on Latino men by saying, oh, they want a big ass truck. Like quite the opposite, actually. The problem that happens in kind of elite Democratic politics is that we don't think that the voter is that smart. We believe that we have to dumb things down when the voters are fairly sophisticated. They not use sophisticated language or anything else of that nature, but they know what they're feeling. And they know when we're throwing bullshit at, and they will vote in their own interests. Until we're willing to accept that, until we're willing to actually have real conversations, we're going to be finding ourselves still on a declining support level.
Let's end by connecting your personal story with what you think the country's next story should be. So as you mentioned, you grew up in Chicago. You grew up poor with a single mom and three sisters. And it's the kind of story in broad brush that I think used to feel more typical than it does today. There's less upward mobility. And I think a lot of Americans are understandably angry about a lot of things. And yet you made optimism absolutely central to your campaign. Here are the opening lines of the ad that introduced you to Arizona voters last year.
Growing up poor, the only thing I really had was the American dream. An opportunity. It's the one thing that we give every American, no matter where they are born in life. It was actually something to believe in and to fight for.
I think for a lot of people, it's an incredibly inspiring story. Whether it's one generation or whether it's 3 generations.
8 generations, whatever it is,
And it's often connected to the immigrant experience, like your family is.
It doesn't have to be, though.
Like my family is. It doesn't have to be, but for most Americans, it is. And I guess I have to ask, do you still think we give that opportunity to every American?
I still think that we can. I think that the things that used to exist, kind of the infrastructure of hope, of opportunity, is kind of slowly eroding. I think what we need to do as Democrats, as Americans, is put that back together. You know, for me, it was, I had a decent school. My mom was a secretary, wasn't great pay, but wasn't horrible pay. We had an affordable apartment. Yeah, I slept in the living room, but we stayed in that apartment. It was in the same school districts. I had, support all around me. I knew that if I got good grades, I could afford to go to college. I could get a scholarship. There was this idea that my sacrifice, my family's sacrifice, was going to have an end result. What I hear, and this is why the campaign started the way it is because, especially from working class people, they don't feel that anymore. And the future of America has to go back to the future of where a Ruben Gallego felt comfortable and believing that the American dream was possible, right? We have to be able to tell, the kid in Kentucky or the kid in California, yeah, you're poor. Yeah, life sucks. But if you do this, you're going to be fine, right? And until we actually not just talk about it, but put back the policies and the infrastructure of how to become successful, how to get out of poverty, people aren't going to believe it.
Can I take a crack at telling you what I think you think America's next story should be?
Sure.
So it should be one part, call it Rosa Parks moderation, respecting voters, meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
I think it's one part populism. You talk about taking on the rich and powerful. I mean, you've said it. If you're in Congress and you're spending more time with the powerful than the powerless, you're doing the job wrong.
Right.
And I think it's one part optimism. It is about the American dream. Is that fair?
It's very fair. Honestly, I think if I had to say what the future is the American dream. It's the thing that's driven us forever. It's what drove us to the shores here. It's what drove us west. It's what drove people from all over the world to come here. It's what drove me some really, really hard days. Like I remember one of the things that I remember just being very angry as a young man. And it wasn't because of the situation that I was in. My anger was the idea that I'm going to work so hard and I may not succeed. And I just don't think I want to have any other young man or woman have that feeling.
Senator Ruben Gallego.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Oh, you got tears out of me, David.
All right.
You. Oh, sorry, son. Don't use that word.